We're all set. We have 8.
Great.
Very good. Good morning, everyone. Today is July 9th. We will be convening this special meeting of the East Bay Community Energy Board. The time is 11:40 a.m., not 8:40 a.m. And I'll just remind folks that we are meeting pursuant to the Brown Act waivers set forth by the shelter-in-place emergency order issued by Governor Newsom. And I will go ahead and turn it over to the clerk of the board to call the roll.
Great, thank you. Alameda County, Albany, Berkeley, Dublin,
Present.
Fremont, Hayward,
Present.
Livermore, Newark,
Here.
Oakland,
Here.
Piedmont, Pleasanton,
Here.
Tracy.
Present.
Thank you. Union City, Community Advisory Committee,
Present.
San Leandro,
Present.
Emeryville.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Very good. And next up is public comment. Our speaker slip was published on our agenda, but I would also be happy to recognize folks who are joining us. If you are joining us via Zoom, please use the raise hand feature to be recognized. If you are calling in, please press *9, and I'll first check with our clerk of the board to see if anyone has submitted electronic comments or speaker slips for this item.
We have not received speaker slips for this item.
Okay, very good. Then we will turn to attendees. Attendees, use the raise hand feature to be recognized. If you wish to speak at public comment, you will be allotted 2 minutes. Okay, I'm not seeing any raised hands, so I will go ahead and close the general public comment. We've got our action item, which is a purchase agreement for a building, and I'll turn it over to staff to present. And again, thank you all for joining us at this hour.
Thank you very much. Adrian, could you pull up the attachment?
Madam Chair, I believe we need to, do we need to close the meeting, a closed session, and remove the attendees? Is that appropriate?
This is not a, no, this is not a closed session.
Oh, not a
because
closed
this
session,
is
my
the,
apologies.
No.
Special meeting, not a clerk, my apologies.
Special,
Go ahead.
yep.
Yeah, we're presenting the agreement.
Yeah, so I'm not going to walk through each term of the agreement. And certainly unless folks would like to do a more thorough kind of review. Let me just give you kind of a background of where we are and sort of the key deal terms in our process. So we did have a closed session meeting, and pursuant to the direction of that closed session meeting, I have been negotiating a purchase agreement for 251 8th Street with the seller, 360 Ventures. I have been working closely with Inder and one of her specialty real estate law colleagues to negotiate this purchase, this PSA, purchase and sale agreement with the seller. And we're at a point where I would say, are largely, we have largely completed the negotiations. The primary outstanding matter has to do with the treatment of a sell lease that has already been entered into. So I'll speak to that kind of after you go through the main deal terms. In terms of the main deal terms, yes, but when I'm done in 5 minutes. The main deal terms, the building was offered for $8.5 million, and we are offering $8.5 million to purchase. We are offering an all cash purchase, and I would say part of the reason for that is kind of the efficiency to close the transaction, and part of it is, I think, as we're reviewing some of the legalities around buying real estate as a public entity, there were some I would say, vagaries in the law around the kinds of commercial lending arrangements we could enter into. And so because of those vagaries, and because we did not want to lose out on this property if indeed it took longer than we had hoped to close our financing, and then also because we do have a strong cash position, we felt that making an all cash offer and then over the course of the next couple months pursuing a refinancing would, one, be most efficient for this transaction and would achieve the same outcome that we desire, which is to only put out a couple $1 million in total, upfront for this purchase, and then finance the rest and pay for that over time. So, in terms of the the ongoing, this is a new building, and I think I've talked of it to folks about the state of the building. This is an older building, but it has been recently renovated and retrofitted. And so while we do expect some tenant improvements are going to be required to build this thing to suit our needs, the second and third floors where we would expect our staff to be domiciled for working, are largely turnkey. There's some interior work that needs to be done, but not a significant amount of work. There's a first floor space that is a little bit more, I would say, raw, but I think that's a good thing because it gives us more ability to sort of assess how we want to lay it out. In general, I think our intention today, but subject to input from you, the board, and and others, is to build a community meeting space on the first floor that could host board meetings, community meetings, subcommittee meetings, CAC meetings. And so, working to figure out exactly what that build out will look like is something that we're going to be engaging in after we close this transaction. In terms of the ongoing sort of contingencies, we are in the process of conducting a number of inspections. So we have completed a general inspection. That inspection did not find any, a couple small little things here and there, but no major issues. We are in the process of conducting a seismic and structural set of inspections with a structural engineering firm. We have environmental and sewer lateral inspections that are, I believe, are taking place this week or took place this week. And those are going to make sure that the state of the water systems and what have you are all in good order. We are going to be doing a mechanical inspection, so that's of our HVACs, of the HVAC as well. And then finally, we have a title inspection that is planned. If as a result of any of these inspections, we find that there is some major issue with the building, this purchase agreement allows us to void the agreement and walk away from the transaction within 30 days with no cost to us. So we have the ability to effectively terminate within that 30-day period as a result of the findings of any one of these inspections. So my expectation is those inspections will all be done, call it in the next 5 to 10 days, 10 business days. And at that point, I'll be able to review with these technical experts everything and make a final assessment to make sure that if indeed this purchase and sale agreement is approved and we've executed it, that we want to follow through with it after the inspections have been completed. Those I would say are sort of the main terms. The only kind of major other outstanding issue that and this has not yet been totally finalized in this agreement is the treatment of a cell tower option. So the seller entered into a cell tower option lease agreement with AT&T. That option has not yet been executed by AT&T. So at the moment, there is no cell tower on the building. We're not generating any lease payments. And because there's no tower, I couldn't tell you exactly what specific technology they're going to deploy. They have a 2-year period under which they can evaluate the site in the context of, I believe, sort of their larger portfolio to determine what kind of cell tower they may want to put up there. and if they want to do that. The option, because it was entered into by the seller, is not subject to our negotiation. It's a kind of a take it or leave it proposition. We're not able to terminate the option. It's really a contingency that we have to live with in the sale. I do see a question from Council Member Vice Chair Lopez.
Thank you. Thank you so much on
Yeah.
that. That was, I think you might have just answered it, whether that was something we had to accept or not. I guess just some follow-ups there is if it's an exclusive agreement with AT&T or not, that would be my second question. And then thirdly, if they exercise the option to put a facility of some sort, a small cell facility or a tower, more of a macro tower, whether we have to, whether we have the ability to negotiate the terms and the lease amounts, and then and including the duration.
Yeah. Great questions. So for the first, it is not, I would say, strictly speaking, an exclusive arrangement, though they have and it's not in this agreement because it's still being sort of worked on, but I would say, I'm not going to get the term of art right here, but effectively an ability to, like, a veto right, if you will. So if another tower were to be put on the roof and they were to determine that tower would somehow negatively impact their performance, they have the ability to say, no, you can't put another tower on here. So I'm not being an expert, I did ask our legal counsel about that. And what does that practically mean? He says, it's not there are some, you can't unreasonably withhold consent to allow another tower, but in his experience, it actually can be quite hard when you have that term in a contract. It can be quite hard to cite another tower, especially on a roof the size of ours, which it's just not, it's a 15,000 square foot building. So each floor is a 5,000 square foot footprint, which means, the roof is, and then on the roof, there's HVAC and packages. So there's not actually a ton of roof space. So I think the legal advice was, practically speaking, it would probably, given the nature of this lease agreement, it would be challenging to lease space to anyone else.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to interrupt, but in our city, when we negotiated this kind of contract, when we had an MOU, we made sure it was non-exclusive, and it was like the option, just like this. But we included the ability to co-locate. So carriers do co-locate. The reason they would say that they don't want to co-locate is not because it really injures their ability to serve, but because they're in competition with one another. So it's important to. So the only when we can talk about these off bar, but I could go on for hours on it. But,
no. And I think it. Yeah,
I think
it speaks to your second question.
Yeah, it's because it would be assuming what if the FCC, if the Supreme Court rules in favor of jurisdictions and rules that the FCC was not within its jurisdiction, there's just money to be made here, like in the lease agreements. And so I mean, that's what our city is really, when we took that money and we're putting it back into a technology funds for digital equity in our case, but we can deploy that money back out into the community. So that's why it matters. So, okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, and just to your second point, unfortunately, the agreement is not subject to our negotiation. So so they have a 5, if they execute their option, it's a 5-year lease with 4 consecutive 5-year extension options. All of these options are at the sole discretion of the cell tower operator. The price was pre-negotiated. The lease price is $4,000 with a 3% annual escalator.
That's very good. That's a very good number.
So
actually,
yeah. So I think from again, what we've been told is it's pretty market, like all things equal, like it's actually a fairly good market term for the cell tower lease, but the agreement is sort of ironclad. So there's not much we could do with the agreement. We just have to kind of accept the agreement, but the agreement itself is not a bad deal.
Very good. I see we have
Um,
questions from Member Kalb first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I presume, Nick, that if in these inspections and that we're undertaking, if we find something that theoretically could cost, some amount, let's say $250,000 to rectify, we can go back to the seller and say, hey, we have to drop the price $250,000 or the deal's off. We don't, it's
That's
like,
exactly right. So
Yeah.
that's exactly right. That's how we would
Okay.
handle. I think as we finish these inspections, say over the next like week or so, we're going to kind of collect all of them, and each one of them, I've asked the firm to kind of provide a cost estimate, and we'll look at it in aggregate. And if it's a bigger, if it's a small number, $10,000, or sort of like, that's just sort of the cost of doing business. If it's a big number, I can't give you exactly what that threshold number is. But I would say if it's a big number, then, we're going to go back to them and say, wait a second, like there's a lot of work that we need to do. So.
okay, thank you.
Great. So next up, we've got Member Hannan.
To kind of follow up on both questions, thank you, Madam Chair. The lease option that AT&T has, when does that 2-year lease option expire?
I believe they executed in February. So they have February of 2023 would be when the option expires.
Thank you. As to Board Member Kalb's questions, if there are substantial costs to the agency for subsequent work that needs to be done, we'd be providing the board a summary as to what those costs were, so that we have an understanding, especially if we move forward on the deal. I'm assuming we'll move forward on the deal if the costs are minimal, but if they're substantial and you negotiate with the seller, will you be bringing back to this board that the sale was consummated and these were the additional costs that we
Yeah, that's exactly. So exactly. I think those would all be delegations that I would be asking for, but right, sort of once the agreement, we'll execute the agreement, and then during this period, either we will seek to either we'll go to them and say we need to renegotiate the price because we found these major things, or we'll say we haven't found any major things and we're not going to negotiate, right? Like if we don't negotiate price, it means that we didn't find anything that sort of we believe rose to that level of justifying it. But if we go to renegotiate price, then, that will also, and I think in either case, we'll let the board know, kind of inform you, all right, the 30-day contingency period is over, and, the deal has been consummated, and, here are the final terms of the deal.
And do we need to give you that flexibility to offer additional money beyond the $8.5 million should additional expenses be incurred? Do you have that authority, or do we need to provide you with some flexibility?
Well, so we wouldn't pay more than 8.5 million for the building. If anything, we would be seeking a, kind of a money back.
Okay.
And there is money that we have sought in our budget above the $8.5 million purchase price for a variety of improvements, right? Office equipment and architecture, building conference rooms, perhaps some, incremental sort of work kind of around the building. And so if we needed more than we've asked for in the budget, we would come back, but I don't expect that we would. If we felt like we needed more money than we budgeted for, then we're going to be renegotiating the price with the seller.
And then my last question, if I recall correctly, is this a unreinforced masonry building?
It is not unreinforced. It is a reinforced masonry building.
So it's been retrofitted?
Yeah. So it has those there's sort of like upside down V joists, those big metal joists, and you have those across the building.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great. Thank you, Member Hannan. Next up, we have Member Sutter.
Great, thank you. And my questions are not about the finance aspect of it, but more around the operating of the building, assuming that the sale goes through. And I was wondering, first of all, I'm assuming it's not like a LEED building. Do we know the efficiency of the building? Do you have plans that you think it would be useful to put in place in terms of some of the tenant improvements to get us to that level of building, so the people that work there have a really nice environment, so the operation of it is minimal? And then the other thing that is, assuming it goes through, I very much support that first floor being a community meeting space. I think that that's needed. And I would also hope that there's a consideration to use that space as a cooling center in the future as needed. Thank you.
I think to the first question about Lee, that's definitely going to be part of the kind of assessment that we do when we bring an architect in. Is it's going to be sort of general. It's not just going to be kind of office improvements, but I think we're going to look at energy improvements as well and saying, are there things we can do around. It does have new HVAC, so I don't know that we would be going and replacing HVAC, and because it's a historical building, there are some limitations around what you can do with windows. But yeah, I think lead certification is something we're definitely going to be evaluating and trying to figure out how do we achieve something like that. I love the idea, whether it's a cooling center or it's a resiliency hub or something to that effect. And I think those are the kinds of things we're also just going to be asking the architect to be kind of assessing, like, what would it take if we want, and there's a whole sort of set of formalities around being an official kind of cooling center. What would that actually entail? What's the level of investment? So, those are exactly the kinds of things that we're going to be kind of engaging with an architect or architects and firms to kind of help us think about.
Hey, Nick, can I just add a couple other thoughts there to share? When we did visit the building, we did take our energy efficiency programs expert with us. And so we kind of looked at the brick, and it is a 2-layered brick. So it is an older building, and it is tough to get, say, a LEED platinum certification on an older building. While we consider that, we want to make this a showcase, sort of a showpiece, and really try to upgrade it from a building energy perspective, given the agency that we are. We also felt like, let's try to do it with an older, more difficult building, as opposed to get a brand new building that's platinum, because that's not necessarily what the building stock in Alameda County is. So we do want to utilize this and make upgrades to it that we feel like are feasible to replicate, and help educate other commercial buildings that you can do this as well. So it may not get the platinum certification, but we do want to evaluate it and do what we can with the space. And in fact, sort of intentionally wanted some of those challenges to work through, if you will. And then the other comment I'll just say is the bottom floor of the unit is publicly accessible, and that's one of the things we really like about the space. We are considering in some of the financing aspects how you can utilize that space, because if you were to sublet it or use it for other means, you can't actually necessarily finance it. So there may be some limitations there just to consider, just as an FYI.
Very good. Next up, Member Kalb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nick, so I'm looking at the building, on Google Map thing, whatever, but should we assume that once we take over the building and we do whatever renovation, there are some things where we'll have to come up to the current code, Oakland's code or state building code, to fix up, whether it's emergency exits or this or that?
I would expect no, just because the building, to get the permits so they did a, kind of a massive undertaking and renovation in the last, 2 years. And so many of, and that's part of our inspection, right, is to make sure that those things are, compliant. They are compliant, but you're not going to be able to actually get this building built and inspected and approved, get your plans approved without going through that whole building process.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, we have Member Marquez.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, can you briefly go over, I know this is an all cash offer, but there was mention about possibly refinancing. So can you just elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I will say it's a bit of a, we're still getting some final advice from bond counsel about this, but in general, what we've been, kind of advised is that it's not actually kind of the typical commercial mortgage that, a business may take from a bank to buy an office building. That, for the most part, when local governments buy property, that's not what they do. Most local governments, when, a city buys a building, they usually sort of, it's part of a broader, like a bond transaction. So a school will buy a bunch of buildings, it's part of a bond transaction. So that's sort of the kind of the common way. And then there's a sale leaseback approach. And then there's a commercial mortgage.
Nick.
What's that?
It's a lease back, not a sale.
Lease, I'm sorry, a lease back, not a sale leaseback. And all three of those options are, strictly speaking, probably available. I think the size of this deal does not really support sort of a standalone bond issuance. So we sort of like, well, that doesn't make sense. And we've just been through with our bond counsel diligencing our ability to pursue a commercial mortgage as opposed to a leaseback. And there are some nuances in sort of how those transactions would work. It's not some banks that can do a commercial mortgage are not really in a position to do a leaseback. And so because there were some of these moving pieces, we decided to pursue an all cash offer given the short time frame. But what we will do is, assuming we close on this property, we approve this today, 30 days from Monday when it's sort of finalized, or Tuesday when it's finalized. 30 days from Monday, the transaction closes, and we take title to the building, and we have quote unquote the keys, early August. At that point in time, we would actually go out either through a commercial mortgage or a leaseback type of structure, and we would raise $4, $5, $6 million, and effectively put a mortgage on the property. And so we would recapture, say, let's just illustratively, let's just say it's $5.5 million. We would recapture $5.5 million of the $8.5 million we put out. We would recapture that money, would come back to us, and then we would repay that $5.5 million over the term of the loan.
Okay.
So thinking about like a home, you'll hear about people making all cash offers on like a home. Oftentimes when someone makes an all cash offer, they actually end up putting a mortgage on, but they put the all cash because it allows them to offer a more competitive offer.
Okay, and then obviously we will have a better understanding of the actual interest rate once we pursue that.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And that's something we are going to bring back to the full board, right? We will not enter into any sort of a debt transaction without bringing that back to the board. So what I would expect we would do is we're going to sort of finalize the kind of approach we want to take with legal counsel in the coming weeks. And then we will, depending on that approach, we will, we have issued an RFP for a commercial mortgage. If we end up having to go the lease-back structure, we would issue an RFP for the lease-back. We'll select our preferred vendor, and then we would bring that forward to the board and say, okay, it's, bank ABC, it's 25 years, it's 2.5%. These are the terms.
Okay, and then my last question is, I'll be careful with what I say. I don't want to disclose any of our closed session discussions, but can you just remind me the parking situation at the site?
There is no entitled parking
Mhm.
at the site. There is street parking, and there are 3 or 4 garages. There's a couple like indoor garages, and then there's some street garages, all within 2 blocks of the building, though.
And what would be the closest BART station to this building?
Lake Merritt BART is about 1.5 blocks, and then
12th Street BART is the other
12th
one.
Street is probably about 5 or 6 blocks away. But there's a large parking facility right kind of in the heart of Oakland Chinatown that's about 1.5 blocks away.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair, for all my questions.
Just an FYI on the financing piece, just so people's awareness, our FAT meeting is technically starting now, but we do have an item specifically on building finance that will go over some of those details that Nick laid out in a little bit more depth.
Thank you for that, Howard. So I just want to note for the clerk that Supervisor Valle is in attendance. He is in the attendees box. If you could please promote him to a panelist. He's the phone number ending 3519. And then next up, we have questions from Member McCarthy. Welcome, Member McCarthy.
Thank you, and I apologize for jumping on late. I just want to revisit what I think is the importance of striving to meet the LEED standards. I think Mr. Chang addressed it to a degree, and I could be wrong because I'm learning about this, but that there are different levels. There's the platinum, gold, bronze, and that sometimes you pay a hefty fee to get that kind of certification, but you can still reach those goals without paying that hefty fee to get that certification. So given the shared value we have in protecting our climate, I would just also encourage that we make it a shared commitment to meeting the LEED goals, whether we get that certification or not. Thank you.
Do you wanna respond
Absolutely.
to that?
And I think that that's something we're, that's definitely something we're going to be kind of focused on.
Great, thank you, Nick. I apologize, I turned off my video just to maximize my connectivity where I am, but colleagues, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to turn to public comment at this moment, as this is an action item. So I will ask the clerk of the board if anyone has submitted a speaker card via our website, or if there are any other electronic comments on this item.
There are no submitted comments for this item.
Okay, and I will remind anyone attending via Zoom to please use the raise hand feature to be recognized, or if you're calling in, press *9 to be unmuted. And Adrian, I still see Supervisor Valle in attendees, and I want to make sure that he is able to join us as a panelist so he can participate in the discussion.
Yes, I'm unable to promote a telephone number to a panelist, but I have allowed him to speak. So if he is in the panelist session, he'll just need to use the *9 or *6 to unmute himself. And
yes, so Supervisor Valle, if you're listening in, there you go. You hit *6 to unmute yourself, and if you desire to raise your hand, use *9 to be recognized, or just pipe up. I'm happy to do that as well. But seeing no further public comment, we will close the public comment section of this item and bring it back for deliberation on the purchase and sale agreement for 251 8th Street. Colleagues, is there any further discussion? I know my questions were answered by my colleagues. All asked really great questions, and all of my questions were answered, but Member Kalb, I see a hand raised that might be left over from before.
Oh yeah, that was from before.
Very good. If I just wanted to give one comment before we vote, which is that I wanted to second Member Lopez, Vice Chair Lopez, excuse me, her concerns about going forward with the cell tower agreement. I think if this option is to expire in the future and we own this building and we are considering future agreements, I think co-location is a good thing to explore. I know in my city, the focus on new development of cell towers has been exclusively on small cell tower sites, not macro sites. So there is, even on smaller rooftops, I've found that there is a potential for co-location. So just something to think about in the future from my perspective. And with that, I'd be happy to entertain a motion, and I see a hand up from Member Hannan.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I go ahead and make a motion authorizing staff to move forward with this purchase agreement as described.
Fernandez will second.
Very good. We have a motion by Member Hannan and a second by Member Hernandez. If there's no further discussion, we'll go ahead and turn it over to
Diane.
Go ahead,
can I just ask? Is there anything we just wanted to make sure that there was, because there's this sort of outstanding cell tower issue we do need to kind of add to the purchase and service agreement, and there may be small non-commercial points that were just kind of like, oh, we want to strike one word here or one word there. I just want to make sure, Inder, you had said do we need to add anything to the motion to make sure that sort of clarification is there for me around a delegation? So if I do make any modest adjustments, I can just pursue those as long as they don't change the overall kind of commercial terms.
Right. To be clear with the board, the cell tower option was already pre-negotiated, so we're not going to be able to negotiate that. So we're not asking.
Right. But I'm saying in the PSA, we just don't have the language in the PSA yet.
But we haven't inserted the language in the PSA because we were up until this morning trying to figure out the exact status of the option and whether or not the option had been exercised yet. So the final purchase and sale agreement will include the appropriate language that reflects the option and states that the option has been exercised and appropriately delegates the or allocates the responsibility for different parts of the option agreement between the buyer and seller. So we'll be adding that. We're looking for a motion that gives us the ability to finalize this purchase and sale agreement with sort of non-substantive changes as recommended by our real estate counsel and broker.
And I'll go ahead, Madam Chair, modify my motion to include that suggestion by the attorney.
And does Member Hernandez accept that modification as a second?
Correct. I will accept that as a second and with the modification.
Very good. Thank you, everyone, for that clarification. And now I will turn it over to the clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you. Alameda County.
Yes.
Albany. Berkeley. Dublin.
Yes.
Fremont. Hayward.
Aye.
Livermore. Newark.
Aye.
Oakland.
Aye.
Piedmont.
Aye.
Pleasanton.
Aye.
Tracy.
Aye.
Union City. San Leandro.
Aye.
And Emeryville.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Unanimously amongst those present. Thank you, colleagues. Really appreciate you hanging in there for this meeting, especially those of you who serve on the Finance Committee. I know you'll be starting a little late. Did someone say something?
Yeah, Chair, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Did this Alameda County, were they called? I'm sorry, I don't know if I missed that.
They were, and he is here by phone, and
Okay.
it looks like he might have dropped off since. But he's in as an attendee, and Supervisor Valle did.
I did vote, yes.
Yes.
Okay,
he did
thank
vote.
you. Sorry, I just want to make sure that was captured. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. I did hear him, and he was noted. And so next up, we've got committee member and staff announcements, including a request for future agenda items. And Member Hannan, I see a hand raised.
I'm sorry, I'm going to lower it.
Very good. I just want to thank staff. I got a tip off that our wind turbines in the Altamont Pass are now spinning, and we are now getting renewable energy generated in Alameda County to our territory. So just a huge tip of the hat to staff for making that happen, and for the board for approving that power purchase agreement so long ago that made all of this happen. I'm seeing no other hands raised. I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 9:18 a.m. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
That was Hawaiian time.
Oh, sorry. 12:18, Diane. 12:18.
Back in
And
time.
it's one.
Yep.
And it's 1:18 here in Santa Fe for me. So.
What? Well, aloha, everybody.
It is 12:18. Thank you very much.
Aloha.
Have a
I'm
great
starting
trip,
the FAT
Diane.
meeting now. We're going to move everybody over to the FAT meeting.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Adrian, do you want us to stay here or move?
Move. We have a different link, so I sent everyone the link.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Sorry,